Hey, it's Haley Steinfeld. When everything requires your attention, it can be tough to figure out what to prioritize. But I'm here to talk to you about something that you should always put first, your breast health. In fact, if you're 40 and over, you should be getting screened once a year. And if you're under 40, it's never too soon to visit yourattentionplease.com to learn about your breast cancer risk. So go on, pay the girls some attention and take the time to find out your breast cancer risk at yourattentionplease.com. Trust me, your future self will thank you.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day. And that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
I think at the time I was embarrassed by myself having such a physical reaction to finding out this news, and actually a little afraid to find out that it wasn't true, that maybe the DNA sample had been mixed or something, because then I would be so crushed because it was such a relief.
Welcome to DNA Surprises, a podcast that delves into the world of unexpected DNA discoveries. I'm your host, Alexis Auersalt. In July 2021, my life took a surprising turn when I found out that I'm an NPE, a person who has experienced a non-paternal event. In other words, my biological father isn't who I thought he was. Join me as we explore the stories of NPEs, adoptees, and donor-conceived people and their families. Get ready to unravel the astonishing journeys that begin with a simple DNA test. This is DNA Surprises. Who would I have become if I had known the truth? How were the interactions I had throughout my life colored by an unknown truth? These are questions so many of us ask ourselves over and over and over again. The reality is, we will never know. No more than we'd know who we would have become if we'd been born in another country. Part of the DNA surprise experience is coming to terms with this. In this week's episode, I'm joined by Guy, who I first interviewed back in season 3. When we first spoke, Guy had just experienced his surprise, and he wasn't sure what he was going to do next. One of the things that struck me was how freeing Guy found the revelation to be. Guy shares what's come up for him since we first spoke, including the many ways he's been analyzing and reanalyzing his past. In the 2 years since we spoke, Guy's come to the realization that the facts of his situation don't matter much to him, and that all he has is now. P.S. If you think DNA surprises are all sad all of the time, this episode is a good reminder that it's okay to laugh sometimes. Thank you, Guy, for sharing your story. Today, I am joined by Guy. He was on the podcast in November of 2022. So that was season 3. We're actually going to do a little bit of an update and see what has happened with Guy and his DNA surprise since we last spoke. So welcome, Guy.
Thank you. Nice to be back.
We left off with you were it was kind of new, your DNA surprise, and you weren't really sure where you were going to go with it. You weren't even really sure how you felt about the whole thing, other than it made a lot of things make sense for you as far as your role in the family. Almost 2 years on, how are you doing today?
It's funny because I've thought a lot about this, and I've talked a little bit with friends about how, my family doesn't experience this because it doesn't change their thoughts of me in any way, nor does it really shade any of their memories, but it affects every single memory I have of not just my family. I mean, also it makes me think, oh, well, I wonder if I had known. I mean, I'm not someone who thinks, I don't live in regret, and I don't believe you can go back and pull one string and not have the entire tapestry fall apart. And so there's no point in saying what if, except from an imagination sort of point of view. And so I've done a lot of that. I've done a lot of, well, what if imagining? I mean, ultimately, there's no way to know whether something would have been better or not. I didn't pursue finding out more because there are people in my family who feel pretty convinced of the identity of my birth father, and that may well be true. I think completely ambivalent about the reality of it or the actual facts of it, in that I kind of enjoy being liberated from fatherhood in that sense, because I didn't feel fathered growing up.
Mm-hmm.
And so not having the opportunity really to the person that many family members think is most likely to be the person. And there's some very tenuous DNA. This would all be circumstantial evidence in court. So that's what I keep saying always whenever my family brings it up. I'm like, there's no actual proof. And I'm not sure that we ever could get proof because that person is dead.
Right.
And the most that even contacting his family could get would be to confirm that I'm somehow related to that family line, which I already have that confirmation, but that doesn't necessarily bring me any kind of enlightenment. And there's no opportunity for that to bring me enlightenment, because I won't get to know this person. I won't get to experience being shaped by this person. I've already been shaped by the experience of having my paternity in question, in the sense that there's been a lot of questioning in my mind, like who knew? The thing is, there's just nobody around. They're all gone. We're old, and so anybody that we might ask is gone. And every now and then I have a fantasy about going up to that town and walking through it and thinking that somebody will spot my face and say, "Oh my God, I can't believe it." But that's not going to happen. Nobody knows me up there. I was 6 months old when I left that town. Now I do look remarkably like my mother, so it's entirely possible that some poor 80-year-old man could see me and be like, "Oh no," but I don't know what good would come of it. The mystery of who my father is almost irrelevant.
Can you tell me more about that? Because so many people that I speak to, that they want to know who it is, and they want to know as much information. And as I always say, everybody's feelings about their experience are valid. So your outlook is just as valid as the next person. But I'm so curious about, why you have that perspective of it. It doesn't matter who he is. It's more just how this whole thing has affected you.
Oh, it frustrates pretty much everybody in my life that I have not pursued this or show much interest in the actual facts of fatherhood. And that is, I think, because I don't want to say the damage is done, because I don't view it that way, as much as what shaped me as a person was my experience of feeling so like an outsider. And it's funny, it's hard when I know some relatives have listened to the podcast, and I think some of them were a little hurt at the suggestion that maybe they had excluded me. And I never meant that. To a large degree, I probably would have been treated very similarly. I was a weird, sissy kid, and I'm sure other sissy boys had similar experiences, even with their own actual birth father. And that's the thing that I think I come down to, is that it almost, again, is irrelevant whether he knew or not, because it doesn't change the relationship he shaped with me. It doesn't change the coldness. It doesn't change the indifference. And I certainly have known enough gay men in my life to know that that's not an uncommon experience. And whether that is a result of fathers who feel alienated from a child who's not like them, I don't know. And because I can't know that, because he never would have shared anything with me that way. Now, I think I dismissed a lot of his behavior toward me as a kind of sense of humor that I didn't understand. And I will say this, in light of these new facts, it makes me feel that I didn't want to see the actual hostility that was there. And that's still hard to process. And so I would rather be fatherless than have another father that I can know nothing about, that I can't communicate with, who can essentially give me nothing. And to find out that my birth father may have been even less affectionate or less willing to know who I was, I don't think I want that. And it's almost just as bad to find out, oh, no, we would have gotten along great and he would have been a great father to me. And, so what do I have to gain by that? What I gained most from this was that liberation, was that I don't have to feel guilty, which I had felt for 50 something years, about having the lack of affection I had for my birth certificate father, that I felt that was on me, that I was never a good enough child because I didn't inspire affection in him, and that was on me. Now, of course, that's ridiculous because I look at all the children in my life and think, how could you expect that 2-year-old, that 4-year-old, that 12-year-old, that 18-year-old to have that kind of responsibility toward the adult in their life?
Right.
And I know that. And so in that sense, the truth has helped me feel liberated from that burden. There's nothing to put in its place, though. And so that's fine. I'd rather have an empty space than something that I can't engage with. Now, look, if I had found this out 20 years ago, 15 years ago, I don't know, because they would have both been alive and he would have been alive. And who can say? If I had known as a child, how would that have been different? I don't know. I don't know any more than, what if I had grown up in California or,
Sure.
just things like that.
Yeah. And I totally respect and understand that perspective of not wanting to spend a ton of time in the what ifs, because there are so many different paths that you could have gone down. Like, what if you'd grown up in California? Yeah. What if? Yeah.
Well, I bring that up because I was convinced as a child that had I grown up in California, I would have been on the new Mickey Mouse Club.
Well, obviously, yes.
It was only proximity that kept me from being a child star. I used to always say that the greatest thing was that my parents didn't get in my way and that they didn't put roadblocks in front of me. Of course, it's hard not to reevaluate that now as indifference. That's the nicest thing I can say about it. I think it was hard, again, probably to embrace me, not just physically, which was true, but also just when I look at the facts of how, that we left that town, that bucolic environment that my brother and sister loved growing up in, and was close to all of my father's family, not because of me, but I have no evidence of that, but it was, literally 6 months after I was born,
right,
in a very small town. Who knows what it would have been like. I mean, I've always been so grateful, even before I knew this, that we left when we did, because we moved to Indianapolis, and, that was the big city as far as I was concerned. But now looking at it, I think, wow, me coming into existence, it must have been a constant reminder that I had, not me, of course, but that my existence was a bump in the road, now whether that got smoothed over eventually, I don't know. I don't know what their relationship would have been like had I not been born, or whether they would have even stayed together. Who knows? These are things we can't be privy to, our parents' inner lives. And so young. My mother was not even 27 when I was born. So I think back to, my God, those were the worst years of my life in terms of decision-making and emotional turmoil. And I just can't imagine having that kind of burden and having to make those kind of decisions of, was it better to stay in a relationship? Could she have left a relationship with 2 kids, but she couldn't leave one with 3? I don't know.
In the 2 years since we've spoken, how has your perception of your mother changed, or has it not? Because you really had a very frank view of your mom. I mean, I feel like you had a lot of empathy and compassion for her situation, but you also kind of described her truly as you saw her. And now that you have a little more distance between your DNA surprise and some of the choices that she made, how do you land with her now?
I mean, that was hard won with my mother, but she's been gone now for 15 years. And so I've had a lot of time to think about her and see her as a character in her story more than as a character in my story. So when I make her the main character of all of this, and I did that young because I didn't understand a lot of times. I mean, she was not a typical mother in the way that we saw mothers on television, and not just on television, but, my friends. When I became aware of that in grade school, I kind of liked it. I still do. Or it's irrelevant to say whether I like it or not. It is the mother I had.
Yeah. You keep kind of going back to that. It's almost like extreme radical acceptance of like, it doesn't even, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It's just how she was. So anyway, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but I just keep hearing that.
I believe that you feel what you feel, and that's real. But I also think sometimes you have to say, okay, I'm never going to understand this. And that doesn't mean I'm going to let go of it. That means I may mull over this my entire life. And that is a hard-won realization of my part. I have spent my adult life thinking, if I review this enough, I will understand this. And that will allow me not to think about it ever again. I'm not sure if it's acceptance as much as you just are this way, that my brain is not interested in being at rest. It is interested in constantly raking over everything of my life. I always say that I admire people so much who can compartmentalize, because I'm not like that. Everything is out in my brain all at once. And I live all of my life all at once. And it's neither good nor bad. It's just the way I experience it. And so with my mom, new things helped me understand her a little bit better and help me see her dilemmas. But again, that's me extrapolating. So I don't know. She's still fascinating to me. But even before all of this, I used to say that every single person who had a relationship with a mother of any kind could write about their mother and nothing else for the rest of their lives and still have material, because it is it's such a fascinating connection. I don't know. She remains, if anything, more a mystery to me. I asked lots of questions like, why wouldn't she tell me? And why would she go to her grave, literally keeping this from me? It wasn't as if she didn't know. That's a ridiculous. And I tried to convince myself of all of the ways that she could have just not known. It's not realistic. And knowing her, it might very well have been on purpose.
Since you're new to H&R Block, we'll look at your returns from the last 3 years for any money your last guy might have missed for free.
I could get money back from last year?
You could. We'll find any mistakes.
Could have really used that 2 years ago when I dated that mistake for 5 months.
Don't leave money on the table. Switch to H&R Block and get a free second look review. Second look is included at no additional cost with the purchase of tax preparation. Results vary. All tax situations are different. Fees apply if you have us file an amended return.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
I remember when I reached out to people about giving updates on their stories. And one of the things that you had said to me since we last spoke was just that a lot has come up for you since we initially spoke, because you hadn't necessarily dived real deep into your feelings around the DNA surprise. So can you talk a little bit about what has come up for you specifically around the DNA surprise?
When I found out, I was 55. And so by that point in my life, again, because I am a constant muser and reviewer, I had done a lot of work examining my complicated relationships with my parents or the lack thereof, and finding ways to make it make sense to me. And so I felt that at that point, though I was not satisfied with the results, I was resolved to them. that even in his last few years, the 2 years after my mother died, when my father was really at sea and made somewhat drunken attempts to connect. And in my head, I thought, well, I'm sorry, I'm done already. This is too late. In my head, of course, I never would have said these things to him. I can't meet you where you're finally willing to come because I left this behind, because it was the only way for me to live and to survive, is to make my peace with this. It would never be satisfying, but it would be done. I'm not going to keep working on this, and I'm not going to reopen this case. And so this threw a whole big monkey wrench into that kind of resignation, in that it just made me be like, oh, goddamn, there's a whole bunch of stuff I did not factor into this.
Yeah.
And I did have a lot of rage, although rage so dramatic and so violent. It was just more of like I was pissed off. Again, none of this was surprising. It all made sense, and it all made everything kind of fall into place. I was pissed mostly because I was like, I was done with this. This was a case that was resolved, and now there's this new DNA evidence, and we have to open the investigation all over again. And so, it continues to evade me, the resolution that I thought I had come to, because now, unfortunately, there's just no way. It's so funny. I remember Oprah talking about how the universe just teaches you the same thing over and again, and it waits till you get real cocky about lessons that you think you've learned, and then it gives you that same damn lesson in a new guise, and you're like, can't believe I fell for this again. Yeah. And that's sort of how this feels. I feel sort of hoodwinked in that. No, I did all this work. I don't know. And I'm not, you know what? We're going to put this piece of evidence that's come in a little envelope, and we're going to drop it, in a mailbox somewhere. We're not going to deal with it because it screws up a very tidy ending. But of course, that's not how life is. So it will continue. I admire people who have found a way to integrate it into their lives. And again, 20 years ago, that may well have been useful to me, but I don't see how it can now. It's all speculation. It will always be me thinking, oh, yeah, remember that time that ... Yeah. Is that different because of this? Well, yeah, because even if it wasn't really different, even if it would have been the same result, I now have that doubt. I now have that, well, maybe this is because I wasn't his kid. Maybe this is because I was a pregnancy that she 5 years later wouldn't have kept. And again, I have thought about this a lot, of course, in light of recent developments with women's health and women's reproductive rights, is that I grew up from a very young age as a staunch feminist and a staunch supporter of women's choice because my mother was. And that doesn't change with the thought that, oh, had she had the ability to do that, she would have made that choice. I don't know that for sure, but at least she would have had that choice. And what difference would it make to me? I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't know the difference. So
it's so complex because, there is so much room for speculation because maybe she wouldn't have, but then maybe she did it on purpose. And it seems like it's almost a universal experience across people that have had DNA surprises of looking back at moments and almost looking at them in a different light. And and to your point, maybe there's nothing different about that moment, but we'll never know because we didn't know. That's a really interesting insight, though, to kind of ponder. I'm curious about your relationship with your sister, because I know last time we spoke, it was like, hey, nothing changes. You're very close. I think, are you neighbors? Is that correct?
Yes, we are neighbors. I can hear her out yelling at her chickens right now, so which I could not be more grateful for. I mean, just really, I just am so grateful, just in general, to have her in my life, but also, I feel very fortunate to have her next door. There's not a change. I feel bad sometimes because I think it causes her distress to hear me talk about it. She was 6 years old when I was born. But because she's the oldest, she has this thought of like, she should have done something. She should have prevented these things that, caused me pain. Well, of course, and I say this to her over and over again, you were a child. That is not your responsibility. You did not have that kind of power. But I think she feels guilty that she even got the tests, And I feel bad sometimes because I think that my musing has caused her to reevaluate a lot of moments in her own life or moments within our family that she sees differently. And even our parents, all siblings have different parents. I knew that from before any of this, that your relationship is always going to be specific to the time you were born, specific to how old your parents were, all of that. That's something you cannot change. I cannot, nor did I ever have the opportunity to not be the youngest. And so that shapes my entire relationship in the family. And that's not a good or bad. That's just this is it. And so you might as well make some sense of it. So sometimes I feel bad about that. I don't want her to feel bad about this for me, but I can't pretend that it's not monumental. I think she feels guilty that she had a very different relationship with my parent. But that would have happened regardless. And I don't resent that. I hope not, because my existence was such a completely different existence than hers. So there's no way I could have ever been treated like she was treated.
Yeah.
She's a sweeter person. I'm just not that nice. I say that with humor, but it's really true. I know. She's the nicest person that I know. I am not. And so consequently, our lives would always be different. And our relationship with our parents would have been different. I was not an easy kid to raise. Again, with no knowledge of any of this, I was a pain in the ass.
But then it goes back to, were you like that because you were
I don't
different,
know.
right?
See, that's
it's like
the thing,
so
isn't it?
circular.
Yeah.
It is so circular.
Yeah, because there's so many things that, yes, I always felt that I was just fundamentally not the same as the rest of the family.
Have you learned much more about the family without contacting them?
Not really. I've looked up on Facebook. They're not very active on Facebook. And again, he has passed. And last time I looked at it, his wife was still alive, which again was a big factor in me not wanting to pursue this. Now, it's very unlikely that this 83-year-old woman doesn't have some sense, although I suppose it's possible. The picture I've got a little bit of this suspect suggests that she might not be that surprised. But to what end? What could I bring to her about this? I just don't think that there's much to gain from it. Now, again, confirmation bias, but all my friends and family have seen pictures. Because, nowadays you can find people's old yearbooks and all that sort of stuff if you're the kind of sleuth who will look for it. And so they're, of course, convinced because there is a similarity. I can see it if you want to see it. They would be laughing at me right now to hear me say this because it's fairly obvious. The siblings, these people seem like nice people who would never imagine that their father, had an affair. And so why bring that to them about a father who's been dead, over 10 years? Of course, I don't know them. I don't know what their relationship was with him. So I don't think there's anything for me to gain from it. They may be very nice people. And in fact, I'm sure they are. But I don't think that there's anything that would enrich their lives to have that knowledge.
Yeah. No, I think that's a very valid point. And it's nice that you're thoughtful about it, and that you have considered and weighed the pros and cons. And of course, you can always change your mind. But I think the idea that you are being considerate of how it may affect them, and then also what you really want out of it.
It may be my way of disguising that I'm a chicken shit and don't have the guts.
I don't think
I'm very good at that. I don't have the guts to take that chance. That's characteristic of me, that I don't have, to adopt a stance of nonchalant indifference because I don't want to risk the rejection. That's valid. Yeah. I won't argue against that possibility.
To be clear, you argued it against yourself just now. I didn't say that. I didn't call you that.
Well, do I contradict myself? All right, I contradict myself. Have a little moment of what it's like to live in my head all the time.
But yes, I mean, you can see all sides, and we can spend so much time with the what ifs and the whys, and you can spend a lot of time there.
I'm glad to know.
Yeah.
I have no regret about that.
That's really good. That's important that you know that. So you mentioned feeling angry, having some anger, feeling kind of pissed off about the revelation and why didn't you know? What other emotions have come up for you in the past couple of years around your DNA surprise?
There is a certain remorse. There's a remorse of what might have been had things been different. I feel that remorse, regret for a relationship that could have been. But then I see the reality of, well, that fact isn't really what made our relationship. It may well have colored every interaction the grown-ups, the parents had with me, as well as my grandmother, my mother's mother. I would not be surprised to find out that she knew. If she didn't know, if it was an actual fact to her, she always suspected, because she was savvy about that sort of stuff. She was such a boon to my spirit in that she seemed to relish everything about me that I was constantly being told was wrong with me, and praised it and uplifted it. And that was invaluable. That's what made a fairly unhappy childhood possible for me to get through. And if there's anything good in my spirit, it's because I'm faking being like her. But would she have done that anyway? You just can't know that. But if she did know, it does make it all make sense. The thing I always say to people, and I probably said this before, is I'll never forget sitting next to her at the sewing machine, and I was 11 or something, and I don't remember what we were even talking about. And she said, "Well, son, there are no illegitimate children, only illegitimate parents." And over the years, I thought it was just something pithy that she had said. But of course, it does make me think, that's interesting.
That is. I love the way that you talk about your relationship with your grandmother. It just sounds very special.
I don't know how I would have survived without her, because she gave me, and again, I don't make it as a joke that anything good about me is because of her and me thinking, what would she tell me to do in this situation, and how very, very often I failed to be able to live up to that, even with the full knowledge that she was also somebody who worked her whole life in terms of who she was trying to be and how she was trying to be better. I'm sure I've told you this story before, that when above her sewing machine, where I spent a lot of time, there was a little newspaper clipping that said, "The heaviest burden to carry is a grudge." And I remember thinking as a child, God, she's so good. I don't think I can ever be that good. It's such a great wisdom. And I don't think I'll ever be that good to be able to let go of grudges. And it was only after she died, I was telling somebody about this, and I was like, wait a minute. Somebody who can let go of stuff real easy doesn't need to be reminded to do that every single day.
Right.
She worked at it. It wasn't that it came naturally to her. She, from everything she told me, was also a difficult child and a pistol and an arguer. And she worked very hard to come to that kind of peace, understanding, whatever it was. And I think she still was working on it her whole life.
For sure.
And that's reassuring,
Yeah, it's a practice.
Yeah. Yes, that's a great, process over product.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. So you're not spending, or trying not to spend, a ton of time on the past, the whys, what could have beens. But looking ahead, do you have anything that you hope will be around your DNA surprise?
The whole process has made me challenge my own thoughts about, when I start to say, well, what if? I ask myself, okay, well, yeah, what if? But what's preventing you from living your life as if that had been true? Partly what keeps me is a deep-seated cynicism. So that's what I fight against all the time. But I don't know what the answer is. What is to keep me from deciding that, yes, this is what all made me, but I don't have to live in that anymore. And I think that has been the last 2 years of, yes, I feel proud of myself. I was feeling proud of myself because I had made my peace with this, before this, with the challenging upbringing that I had had and the complicated relationships and just how it affected all my other relationships in my life. And I was very settled with that. But this has made me go, but why can't you just get rid of that? I mean, yeah, that's true. Yeah, you did grow up in Indiana, but that doesn't mean anything anymore. That doesn't have to mean anything. I love Indiana. That's not a dig against Indiana. It's purely a metaphor. But that the facts of my life don't have to mean anything in the sense that those things don't have to prevent me if I am willing to do the work from the things that I blame them for. It's really easy to say, oh, well, that's why I'm not good, doing this. That's why I am uncomfortable in certain social situations. That's why I'm bad at relationships. Well, okay, but you don't have to let that continue,
Right.
Whether I have any success in changing that, I don't know. But
Yeah.
maybe that is what the last 2 years have given me, is that, yeah, you thought things were this way and they weren't the whole time. And so the reality is that only right now, that's all there is right now.
Mm-hmm.
And you can make a choice not to have that be what colors everything from the future, going on. Now, that's an optimism that I believe strongly in. Whether I can adhere to it is oftentimes the hard part. As I'm sure I said before, I like to think of myself as a lapsed optimist because that is my nature that fights constantly with my pragmatic side.
Yeah. Well, just like your grandmother, with her grudges, that is a practice. Last time we spoke, I asked you for advice for somebody who had a DNA surprise and for parents who were keeping a DNA surprise from their child. Today, I would like to ask, what advice do you have for Guy of 2 years ago?
Golly, that's hard. I'm always thinking about great things to tell my 17-year-old self, which is pointless because he wouldn't listen to anything. But the 55-year-old guy, I don't know, except to say, in that first moment, as much as this all makes sense to you, you will not understand this. And do not let the way that all of these cards seem to fall into place fool you into believing that you have figured this out. Because this will never be done, but it will also perhaps be the first time that you are able to compartmentalize, and not in a negative way. Because I think there's a way to have positive compartmentalization in that, or as I like to joke about, being, beneficial disassociation,
Yeah.
in that I forget about it because it doesn't change who I become, and it doesn't change so much. This will be with you. And surprise, surprise, there will be no easy answer to this. But also, maybe the thing I would want me to know is that immediate lifting of shame and guilt will be permanent.
Mm.
And that I did not understand at the time.
Mm.
And the relief, you don't feel it all the time because it is like having a hip replacement from what I'm told, or a knee replacement, is that it immediately stops hurting and you forget about it because that pain is gone, and that is permanent. And so perhaps that's what I would tell myself, that regardless of all the Sturm and Drang that this will bring up and the avalanche of things that will happen, again, not necessarily because of it, but in line with it, that feeling will go away and that you won't think about it anymore. That's a small piece of a heavy burden of feeling unworthy that you can let go of. And that's a great gift. And the rest of it means you have to do that work. Now that I would not want to hear, because I don't like to do stuff I'm not good at right away.
Same. Oh, Guy, thank you so much for coming on and giving me an update on your journey. I'm so happy to hear that pain and shame and embarrassment has been a permanent relief for you that you aren't faced with that anymore. And wherever you land, like you said, it never fully goes away, this experience. It's something that we'll always think about. But I hope that it continues to get lighter for you.
Well, thank you. I love talking to you because actually I don't think I'd ever vocalized that before to myself. Just that, oh yeah, it is important to remember that pain was with you so long that you didn't even know that it was pain anymore because it was the way to be. And having that lifted is a miracle. So
that's
everything
beautiful.
else has been so worth it.
Yeah, that's amazing. Thanks again to Guy for joining me. If you have a DNA surprise you'd like to share, submit your story at dnasurprises.com. And be sure to join me next week for our Season 9 finale. You won't want to miss it. Until next time. This episode of DNA Surprises was hosted, produced, and edited by me, Alexis Auersalt. It was mixed and mastered by Josh Auersalt of Siren Recording Studios.